And I got there in the end. Oh, hang on, I've got to turn this volume down a bit. There we go. The level on my microphone is a bit high and the Stream Deck comes in hot. So every time, if I reboot the Stream Deck, I've got to, sorry, the 8M, I've got to remember to turn down the levels a couple of notches. Otherwise it ends up clipping the audio. I acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Wajok peoples. Sorry, I mispronounced that terribly. Wajok Noongar peoples. I pay my respects to their elders,
Mitchell
past and present.
You were early yet still late, haha grin.
Yep. And to Aboriginal elders and peoples from other communities who may be taking part in this live stream today. Yes, good morning everybody. Now, I've got to beat the rapid scrolling. So good morning to Austin, David T, Dodgy, David, Duke. Sorry, I just got a message. I've got to put my phone on Do Not Disturb. Gavin, Henrik, Henrik Ostrov is here. We have a couple of regular Henrik, so I have to disambiguate now. Hooks? Hooks? Who is Hooks? I don't know who Hooks is. Iggy, thanks for coming along. Scrolling again. Jax Tech, Johan Gunnison is here. Johnny Bergdahl. Good morning, Johnny, or good evening, or whatever it is in Sweden. Mitchell. Pascal, Scott is here. Some call it fun. Stephen W is here. Tech Nebulous. Trady. My computer is still dinging even though I've silenced my phone. Tekla, stop messaging me. Scott, I said Scott. Where am I on the list? David Crisp, David Howes. Mahmoud is here. Crispian is here, and Tassie Bob. I don't think I've seen you for a little while, Tassie Bob. Delane, Sion, Imi, Russell, Jack. I think that's all so far. There might be more appearing in the list. Okay, where am I? Okay, I've got to pop out the chat. So, I have no specific overarching topic today. It feels like, hang on, I've got to mute for a second. There we go. I haven't spoken to a human with my actual speaking voice. When was the last time? What day is it today? It's Sunday. Did I speak to anybody yesterday? Maybe? Maybe? Anyway, I've got to remember how to use my voice. I communicate with people online and through text message and that sort of thing so often that I'm constantly in communication with people, but a remarkable amount of it is done through text. And then I realize that I haven't used my voice for a while and it doesn't work so well. Okay. Where was I? That's right. I was saying that I don't know why it is, but over the last couple of weeks, I've had more borderline philosophical conversations with people than I normally have. I think it's Peter Davidson says, need to talk to yourself more. Yeah, I talk to myself all the time. And I talk to at the moment, right over this weekend, I'm house sitting for my sister. She's gone away for a basketball game and she's gone away interstate for a basketball game. My niece is supposed to be playing, but she hurt her ankle. Oh, which reminds me of something else. I'll get to that in a second. So I've been house sitting to look after their dog, which means that I've been talking to the dog all this weekend. And the silly thing is, Maya, the dog, is quite deaf, and I can't help it. I talk to her anyway. I just keep talking to her, even though she can't hear me. Yeah, Jack said it's good to talk to yourself, even argue with yourself, but if you lose the argument, you're in trouble. I lose fights with myself all the time. Now, Yeah, so I don't know what it is, but maybe it's just the people I've been talking to. There are some people that when I talk to them, I end up getting into more personal things than I would otherwise typically talk about, in the normal day-to-day conversation of just more practical matters and just getting on with things. There are often people that you come across who who bring that out in you, and you end up talking about more deep things, or more things that are related to self-examination and examination of the world around us. And that's been happening a lot to me recently. Mitchell said, I was going to say get a dog to talk to. They are good listeners. Yep. Oh, Scott says, 2 cats in the house to talk to. Usually things like, retract those, you idiot. Are you talking about retracting the claws? Yeah. Ragnare is here as well. Yeah. So, the thing that I was reminded of, so my niece's injured ankle reminded me, I know there are a bunch of electricians who typically watch these live streams, and so my nephew is currently looking for, he wants to do an apprenticeship, an electrical apprenticeship. So he lives in the outer east of Melbourne, and if anyone here is an electrician and is looking for an apprentice, please get in touch, and I will pass on your details to Matt, or vice versa, whichever way it goes, and hopefully he will, yeah. Anyway, it'd be good to put him in touch with someone that needs an apprentice, because he needs someone to, what's the term? The opposite of an apprentice. Someone to take him on. Oh, Jack said, yeah, it's been a weird week for self-reflection since I quit my job a week ago due to it being really toxic for my mental health. Wow. Jack, that's a big thing to be undertaking. Yes, Jack Steck said a master. Yeah, a master and an apprentice. Gavin said MP has a jobs board that he might find useful. What is MP? I'm not familiar with that. Is that something to do with the Electricians Association or something? I don't know. So where was I? Oh, that's right. Yes, I had just read Jack's message about quitting a job due to it being really toxic. Oh, Melbourne Polytechnic. Okay, thanks, Gavin. Melbourne Polytechnic has a jobs board that might be useful. All right, I'll pass that information on to Matt. Thank you. Well, that's really tough, Jack. I hope a few things for you. Firstly, I hope that being out of that situation is a positive experience for you, and that you now have an opportunity to take some time and to recover from whatever that was doing to you mentally. I know that and the second part is, I hope you find something suitable, an appropriate place that you can get some work quickly, and something that is appropriate and is positive and supporting. I know that it can be, when you're in a workplace that is messing with your mind, it's a situation where it's very easy to stay in it far longer than you should, because obviously the workplace is important in terms of being able to buy food. It kind of matters, and having somewhere to live. So if you don't have other work options, you can end up stuck in a very toxic situation for much longer than you should. And also, a lot of the times these situations creep up on you. It may not be immediately obvious what's going on, and it takes quite some time to realize that you are having reactions to situations, and even longer to realize that you need to do something about it. So I hope that you're not in a situation where it dragged out over a long period of time and then it's having a long-term effect on your mental health. So yeah, all the best for that. I hope that now that you've made this change, it's a very positive change in your life and in your state of mind and in your future. So I really wish you the best of luck with that. So, as I was saying, I don't have a specific overarching topic for today. There will be more KiCad stuff. I was talking to Mitch during the week, and in fact, I went to the movies with Mitch a couple of days ago. We went and saw Dune 2. And we are going to do more KiCad in future, but we're just giving it a little bit of a break. And what's probably going to happen, I think, is I'm going to be using KiCad for a couple of projects in the meantime. So I need to put in some hours. I need to become a bit more familiar with it. Now that Mitch has taken me through the process of the schematic, doing some PCB layout, the ERC and DRC, we've generated production files, we've uploaded them to JLC. I didn't actually send it off for production because it still needs tweaks done to it, but we uploaded them to JLC, and JLC accepted the files. The renders looked okay. The general workflow I've now gone through from beginning to end, and it seems fine. So what I need to do now is I just need to iterate on that. I need to put in some hours with using it, becoming more familiar with it, and then the next logical thing beyond that is for Mitch to come back and we'll do another joint live stream where we go through a little bit following on from that. There are a number of plugins and other things for KiCad that are definitely worth showing. One that I've used in the past is the interactive BOM, the interactive bill of materials, which is an incredible plugin. For those of you who don't know, in fact, I wasn't intending to get into this, but I'll see if I can find an example of this. Interactive BOM, let's see, a demo is worth 1,000 words. Okay, this, I will bring it up on screen in just a second. If this is the one I'm thinking of, I think it looks like it might be. So interactive HTML BOM. So what this does is take, oh yeah, and I have used this in the past with Eagle files as well. So what it does is it takes your project files and turns it into, yeah, here we go. There's a video demo. Although it's in light mode. I've been using it in, yeah, there we go, dark mode. Looks so much better in dark mode. And what you can see is that it shows you bill of materials on the left hand side, it shows you the board layout on the right, and by selecting parts on the left, it highlights it on the board on the right. And this is extremely useful when it comes time to actually assembling a PCB. So if you are at the prototyping stage and you're not using a pick and place machine, you are manually putting parts on the board, this is incredible. It is such a good tool. Because what you can do is say, all right, where are all of the 100 nanofarad capacitors? And you click this and it highlights them all on the board, and then you can put your 100 nanofarad caps down, and then you mark it as placed, and then go on to the next one, and where are all the 100K caps? And then you mark them as placed. So it's a great tool for streamlining the hand assembly process. I've used this in the past both with KiCad and with Eagle. And it's, yeah, it's a very, very cool thing. So there are things like this that I want to demonstrate. There is also a plugin that is used for generating production files. It streamlines the process of going from your design to having a package ready to go. So there are lots of add-ons for KiCad that allow it to do really cool things. And yeah, anyway, we will get onto that sort of thing, but not just yet. Wagon loads. Welcome, wagon loads. Who else has arrived since I did the introductions? Luminator is here. Peter Davidson has arrived. Ragnar. Jordan Reese is here. Good morning, Jordan. Kez, and wagon loads. All arrived. Yeah. Oh, okay. So this is. I need to start paying attention to the chat. Gavin says, what do we want? IOTAP. When do we want it? Now. Well, that's an interesting one to get back to. All right. I'm going to do a quick scan through the chat and then see where we can go. Kez asked, thoughts on AGI/AI creating PCB designs? That is a good one as well. A good topic to come back to. Mitchell said, in response to Jack's comments about mental health and a toxic workplace, it just takes time to heal, but it will feel weird without the BS and stress for quite a while. One thing I can say is pick a hobby or something to focus on. It helps. Yeah. So my perspective on that, I totally agree with what Mitchell is saying. When I was going through the worst of the down times that I've been through in terms of my mind breaking was, I'm not going to go into this right now, but it was in relation to some issues with my software company, IVT, and my business partner. And I had a breakdown and left. And what I think saved me at the time, well, one of the things that saved me was that at the same time, we were doing major renovations on our house. It was the big extension that ended up resulting in building the garage and the workshop that you've seen in the past, my old lab. It was while that was being built. And I spent about 3 months basically being a builder. We had a builder. So there was a builder working on doing all of the extensions, and I just became like a builder's lackey and helping with different random things. And it was such a change because I went from the environment of my software company to physically building stuff. It was a radical change of environment and around different people, doing different things, solving different kinds of problems, and undertaking physical activity, physical labor instead of sitting at a computer all day. And that change of environment gave me the time that I needed to decompress my brain and get it back sort of into some form of balance. And having, as Mitchell said, having some kind of a hobby or some other activity really does help. So I absolutely agree with that. Yes. As it'll leave you... Oh, Austin says, this is just a throwback to what I was saying about KiCad. Austin says, don't use the Gerbers in the add-on package as it'll leave you without tented vias, but it's great for BOM and placement files for JLC. Okay, thanks for the advice. I think you might have mentioned that last time, like as we were doing some production files previously for that as well. Use Gruel to view people or no? Oh, Mitchell. So Mitchell, then you can play computer games. Oh, sorry. The reason I'm pausing here is this is do I go down this rabbit hole or not? Okay, so then you can play. Crispian made the comment, then you can play computer games. So this, I think, is in relation to the IMSI 8080 replica kit that Jack was talking about.
Mitchell R. said, might as well lol.
Yeah, might as well. All right. Many of you... So there are many, many things that... I don't even know how to begin with this. There are almost no coherent thoughts in relation to it, but over the last couple of years, many of you will have heard me comment about the game and then the TV series, The Last of Us. And when I've been going through bad mental situations over the last few years, playing The Last of Us has kind of become a little bit like a meditative thing, because I'm not really a gamer. Like I don't play computer games. I don't play a wide range of games. I don't play games very much. But what I've found is that the story of The Last of Us and the gameplay, it was something that I found that I could start doing it. Like I could sit there playing The Last of Us and either become lost in that world as an escape, or I could be barely even thinking about what I was doing, because I've played through it many times. It's kind of like fiddling with a toy or something. You know how what's the term? Stimming or whatever. So like those I don't have one here, but one thing I often do is, this is a geometric shape that was designed by my friend Chris, and this was his Christmas present to me one year, a few years ago. It was a 3D model. It was like, it's a mathematical representation of a certain shape, and I then 3D printed it. So he, yeah, his present to me was a mathematical representation of an unusual shape. Which is the kind of guy he was. The strange sort of present to give someone. But yeah, it was meaningful to me. And so I sit here and fiddle with this. So anyway, the game The Last of Us and The Last of Us Part 2, I can sit there playing it as something that I do while I'm also thinking about other things. So it's almost like a meditation sort of thing. So even though I say I'm not a gamer, I use that game, I suppose, as a kind of escape. Escape slash background to thinking about things. Okay, where is it? I think I've missed a whole lot of chat. Computer games. Okay, so Mitchell asked, am I using the Squirrel app to view people or no? Yes, I am. So I'm going to bring this up. Luckily it's password protected, so you can't get into it. But this is the admin interface for Mitchell's text-to-speech thing. I think it's okay to show this. Like the even the URL is shown there, but nobody can get in. Oh, Don S is here as well. So what happens is this shows the last message, and I can click on it to replay the last message. There is the intro, which I can click on there to play. the chat comes up on the
Mitchell
right.
said, yep, all good.
Yep, and you can see on the screen there it says the last comment was Mitchell R said, yep, all good. And one of the features that Mitchell added is that each time, the first time someone posts in the chat, it adds their name to a list, and then the list appears on the right. And what this means is that in the past, when I was saying good morning to everybody, what I would be doing is scrolling down through the chat and mentioning names and trying to remember whether that person had been mentioned previously. And with this, I get a unique list. So this is a unique list of every person that has said anything in the chat. And okay, so Mitchell, while we're making requests, if it's not too cheeky, one thing that happens is that if I'm scroll to the top of this list, oh, it just did it, I think. Yes, so Squirrel Protection Society just did a first post and it jumped. So anytime that someone posts, it adds to the end of the list and then it jumps to the bottom of the list. So what happens is that at the start, everybody is commenting at the start of the stream, and I'm reading out names from the top and it keeps jumping to the bottom, and then I scroll to the top and then it jumps to the bottom and then I go to the top. So if it didn't, oh, it just did it. Mitch! Yes, that added you to the list, Mitch. So it just did it then. So it jumped down to the bottom because Mitch posted on for the first time in this chat. So if it didn't jump to the bottom, that would be handy. But apart from that, no, it's an awesome tool. Thanks, Mitchell. This is not a list test. Doesn't YouTube provide an API for that? Yes. So that's what Mahmood asked. Yes, it does. And that's the API is what this system is using. Oh, and Scott says the actual chat has the same habit. Yeah. Yeah. So this is coming off the API, which is just providing a list of all of the chats. No, but the point is that what this is doing is creating a list of each person that has posted in the chat. Okay. Fidget toy. Yes, Sion said it's a fidget toy. That's what I was, like a fidget spinner. That's the term I was trying to think of earlier.
Mitchell R. said refresh. Should be fixed slightly smiling face.
What? Okay, refreshing, activate.
System connected. Activating the super house. Squirrel.
Oh, that's amazing. Mitchell is so fast with feature requests. It's ridiculous. All right. Yes, polling does suck. Now, oh, Iggy, happy chocolate festival. Yeah. Where was I? Okay. Half an hour in, I have no topic. But just chatting to you all is my therapy. So thank you. Just looking around. What are we going to cover today? There are many things I could cover. I'm thinking about what I would like to show. Now, a few weeks ago, I very briefly showed you the start of a test jig that I've been working on. And yeah, Mitch says, quick, find a squirrel. Tiribian Sun.
Amanda Thompson said, I too am not a gamer, but I can lose time playing Tiribian Sun.
Tiribian Sun. I have never heard of that. Oh, talking about Tiribian Sun though, that reminded me. Who here has read or seen the Netflix series of Three Body Problem? It's Three Body Problem has been on my must-read list for ages, and I've been really bad about reading in recent years. I just haven't been taking the time to get a book and sit and read. And because I'm house sitting at my sister's place and she's got a TV, I've been watching I've just watched the entire first season of Three Body Problem on Netflix, and it is awesome. Oh, it's so good. Oh, Stephen says, I just watched Three Body Problem on Thursday. It was a mixed bag for the show. Yeah. I haven't read the book. I've heard that there are...
Maker said, yep, watched it. Was quite cool. Don't give out spoilers.
Yeah, I won't give out spoilers, Sion. I've heard that there are changes from the book for the movie and... Oh, for the series. But I haven't read the book, so I don't know what the changes are. But I really, really enjoyed the Netflix version, the Netflix series. I just finished the last episode last night. Yeah, some really interesting ideas. It was one of those series where it starts off moderately strange, and I kind of wondered, is this for me? But it gets into all sorts of issues that nerds totally will geek out on. Yeah. Jack's Tech said, significant changes from what I've heard. Yeah. Stephen, it was an interesting way to approach stopping a ship. Yeah, I'm not going to get into spoilers, but there are concepts, there are representations of things in it that I've read about in other science fiction stories, and it was just so interesting to see them represented on screen. And yeah. Oh, Delane says, debating on watching it. Well, Delane, I don't know what kinds of movies and things or what kinds of books you like, so I don't know whether you specifically would like it, but I personally really, really enjoyed it. Yeah, there are things in it. There are things in it that it's easy to criticize, but the way I tend to approach things, the way I watch movies and the way I read books, I think I tend to be reasonably non-critical. Now, there are certain things where I say that, but sometimes when I'm watching a show, there are certain things about movies that drive me nuts, and it just totally breaks my suspension of disbelief, and I can't handle it. But yeah, there are certain tropes that I just don't like. One is, one is physical damage to bodies. The fact that in so many shows, particularly action shows, people take huge amounts of damage and they somehow keep going. Like, take a gunshot, and then if they're the hero, they can somehow just get up and keep walking or something. It's like, no, if you've lost functionality, you've lost functionality. That part of your body doesn't work anymore, quite apart from all of the enormous pain and things that you're in. So people falling like off 2-story buildings and then getting up again afterwards and that sort of stuff. No, you break every rib in your body and you crack your skull and that sort of thing. So that sort of thing drives me crazy. I just can't stand seeing it. If someone takes damage, make it realistic. If they're damaged, they're damaged, and they're not getting up and continuing. So, but with things like Three Body Problem, which represents interesting scientific concepts and types of advanced technology that we can't necessarily explain, or that we can conceptualize with our current understanding of technology, but we haven't seen it ourselves, Curtis. Curtis is now a silver supporter. David says, maybe you just haven't been training enough. Yes. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. I had a good hard striking session yesterday, and I ended up... Okay, this is getting off topic, but my striking coach was having some fun with us by the end, and getting us to do some weird combos. And there was one combo where we had to do a spinning back kick, followed by, I've got to try to remember the name of it, a spinning jumping outside crescent kick. That's right. So you start facing your opponent and shift your stance. Because I'm an orthodox stance, I shift my stance to the left, jump off my lead leg while spinning, and then it was an inside crescent kick, and then do a crescent kick while spinning. And I did that a few times, and then because I've got a rotator cuff problem on my right shoulder, on throwing my arm back, I wrenched the rotator cuff, which hurt like hell. Oh, anyway, the pain went away after a couple of minutes, and I continued. And then later, I was sparring with the coach, and he caught me with an elbow across my head. Luckily, I blocked, so he'd already punched me a couple of times in the face, so I had my guard up high, and I blocked with my left as he did like a slashing elbow across my face. But it was a hard blow. So I took some knocks yesterday. It was so good. Sion says, I need to watch the new Roadhouse movie with insane fight scenes and, well, body damage. Insane body damage. Yes. Yeah, I should. Iggy says, BJJ is very popular among my colleagues. One of my buddies usually comes to work damaged after each session. Yeah. Yeah. I haven't done BJJ since Thursday. I'm missing it. It's been so long. Yeah, Thursday's session was quite strange because it was... Yeah. Well, David said, see, and you say action heroes can't take hits. Well, that's the thing, is the human body is both stronger and weaker than you think it is. It's a very strange thing. I know I've said this before on live streams. A lot of fight training is about being beaten up. It's about being in really bad situations. It's about learning to be hit hard and not freak out. It's normalizing it. It's being in really bad situations, experiencing pain, and continuing to function in a useful way without stopping. And so a fair bit of training is, like, particularly the conditioning, like when we're doing things like just kicking each other, is about, yeah, I can take hits. I can take really hard hits and I'm going to be bruised and it's going to hurt the next day. But I know that I can take a hard hit and not freak out because it's happened to me so many times already. But, yeah, and for a typical person, a normal person who hasn't done any fight training, if you give them a good hard leg kick, they will freak out because it is a sort of pain that most people haven't experienced, and it's so unexpected. You wouldn't think that being kicked in the thigh can do the things to you that it will do. So it's partly about that sort of conditioning. Why am I talking about this? I have no idea. But yeah, the converse to that is also how fragile the human body is. If you get hit in the right way, or in the wrong way rather, or if you get a joint manipulated in a certain way, all of a sudden it can be life-changing. You can end up with life-changing injuries, things that you can never fully recover from, or things that will take a long time to recover from. It only takes slipping, falling the wrong way, banging your head in a certain way, and all of a sudden that's the end. So yeah, that's one thing that all these years of fight training has taught me, is that the human body is both stronger and weaker than you think it is. Right. Oh, Some Call It Fun is here too. Oh, hang on. No, because the list updated. I think I said hello to Some Call It Fun earlier. Yeah. So, Jordan says, I shattered my heel 2 years ago and I'll never have full function in that foot again. Yeah, that sort of, I'm sorry to hear that, Jordan. That sort of thing really sucks. It's, sometimes it's about ongoing pain, like you might have ongoing pain from things. Other times it's just loss of functionality, like the fact that if a certain joint is damaged, you will never be able to move that joint again the way that you could in the past. It's just a permanent decrease in the functionality of your body. Crispian said ditto, but back in '94, yes. Yes, it's not my place to tell your story. I know you've told it semi-publicly at barbecues and things here, so a lot of people in the chat will know the story that Crispian is talking about what happened to him, or more accurately, what he did to himself in 1994. Yeah. Crispian did a lot of damage to himself, which is lifelong damage. Oh, Scott said, specialists have told me I'll be in a wheelchair by 40. Oh, that's bad. Wow. Oh. I didn't think that you were less than 40. Scott says, I'll be 60 next year, still avoiding the chair. Well, congratulations on 20 extra years of chair avoidance. And Scott also said, I watched Fallout Nuka Break last night. They got it right. Boom, dead. Yeah. What topic am I on? What topic am I on? I have no idea. Yeah. Oh, Crispian said, specialists told me I'd never walk again, so don't pay too much heed. Yes. And Crispian is definitely walking again. Very definitely walking again. Now, I should talk about some tech stuff. Yeah, Jack's Tech said, welcome. Here we go. Is the chat going to work? I'll see. Oh, no, it didn't, because Jack's Tech is not a... I'm going to see if I can do this. Say Jack. I've never actually done this. Does this work? I'm not sure if that's how it
Scott
does.
Miller said tonight's topic, squirrels.
Yep. Help, yes. I got the syntax wrong. All right, I'm going to type help. Help. Say, accent, blah. We'll speak the last message from the user. Oh, tell. Okay, I should have done tell. I'm going to do tell Jack's Tech. Jack's Tech. I want to do this. Here we go. Come on. Do it. Do it.
Jack's Tech said, welcome to the John Variety Hour.
There we go. All right, I've got to remember what the commands are. Thank you, Steve the Squirrel, for helping me out. Yeah, so there is the tester that I would like to talk about, and that I'm not really. Will I? Sorry, I'm. Yeah, I can always do help. I'm not set up to talk about it, but it is a topic. I'm really tempted to power it up, log in, and show you what I've got, but it is really in a rough prototype stage. Not that that's a bad thing. I'm perfectly fine with showing you my crappy lashed together proof of concept. And at this stage, ideas. So the fundamental problem, hang on, I'm just wondering if I should go and power it up. The tester prototype is currently sitting on the workbench out in the cleanish room, and it's not turned on. So what I could do is turn it on and log in from here. I am going to do that. I'm going to, hang on, I'm going to try bringing up the security camera. Oh yeah, Jordan says, you mentioned the IoT AP earlier. Is it still as relevant now that Unify supports PPSK? That is something to talk about. All right, I'm going to bring this up here. Oh, what? It changes the aspect ratio. That is stupid. Come on, Reolink, you can do better than that. That is a bad design decision. I wonder if I hold down shift. No, holding down shift and dragging it maintains the aspect ratio. All right, I am going to go for a quick walk into the cleanish room. Oh, and there is more stuff in relation to the cleanish room as well. While I'm in there, I will point out a couple of things. Yes, Jordan, PPSK. Remind me later if I forget. I do want to come back to that topic because the way Unify have implemented it, I don't think is that useful. Well, it's useful, but it's not. What am I looking for? Oh yeah, lab power supply. Hello. So this is the tester. You can see there is the receipt printer here, tester here. I should connect something up to it. Power supply, turn on the lab power supply, turn on the tester, turn on the receipt printer. I need a board to plug into it. Maybe that one? Did this one have a fault? Why is it sitting here? I don't remember. Why is it sitting there? No idea. It's in the fail tray and there's no note on it, so there must have been some failure with that one. So I need to find a board that I can... Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to reflash one of my test boards. So I've got some boards out here that I use for just general testing. Not that one. Maybe this one. This one has been nastily hacked. Whoa, that's in rough shape. Okay, this one I think has... Yes, this one will do. Now, this is not ideal because this is... The main impetus for doing this has been for... So I'll plug that in. So you can see here the device under test is plugged in. Barcode scanner is here. How am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? Oh, the serial number on this is 1111, which is convenient. So normally I do this in here, but I want to do it from my computer so that you can see stuff. So what I'm going to do is, well, I'll leave the barcode scanner there. We're not going to use the barcode scanner. I'm going to type the serial number in, and because the serial number on this board is 1111, it's easy to remember. The Raspberry Pi is now booted. The test thing is like it's all there. We've got a programming header plugged into the device under test. We don't have anything else plugged in right now. So anyway, I will explain more when I get there. Now, one thing that happened was this computer, I don't know if it's in the field of view, but this big computer here, that is the Ubuntu computer that has been running pick and place machine number 1 for ever. And it died during the week. And I ended up getting some of these little compact PCs. I think I mentioned this last week actually. So these are the little Think Center compact PCs that I got from Matt. And so these, hang on, this one? Which one? KO3. Okay, so there are now 4 of these mini PCs that have Ubuntu installed on them with OpenPNP, and everything is set up. So I've got one compact PC for each of the pick and place machines, plus a spare. And the spare has all of the software loaded on it so that it can be swapped in as a replacement for any of the machines if the controller fails. Anyway, that's not what I'm talking about today. The tester, yes, okay. Back to the tester. Now, what I've been trying to figure out is, oh yeah, it was in the field of view. What I've been trying to figure out is, I'm just going to pull this off for a moment. Because I want to show you the tester. Badunk. That'll do. Maybe. Hopefully that's readable. Maybe I'll zoom it in even more. There we go. Maximum zoomage acquired. All right. What have I got here? CD test runner blah. I actually can't remember whether there is anything in here that is confidential. I hope not. Now, okay, since the PPSK thing has come up, I'll just mention that in passing now. Okay, so the IoT access point. Now, the whole point of the IoT access point project was to be able to do personal pre-shared keys and assign a unique password to each device on Wi-Fi without using certificates. So typical IoT devices can't support the what's the term for it? It's so long since I've played around with this now, I can't even remember the terminology. Like basically corporate type authentication. What is the term for that? And so what I wanted to be able to do was have, yeah, enterprise, that's right. Yeah, so Radius is the authentication server that is typically used for enterprise authentication. So EAP and PEEP. Radius stands for Remote Access Dial-In User Service, I think it is. And I used to run a Radius server years and years and years ago, like EAP, yeah, EAP TLS. So back in the days of in the early days of Internet Vision Technologies, before it was even called that, back when it was Mission Internet, I used to provide dial-in internet services, and I had a radius server so that I could create users, I could manage users and their session times and all of that sort of thing. That was back in the mid-90s, late 90s. Anyway, so I may be wrong about this, but what I read about how Unify have implemented PPSK is not the way that I want to use it.
Mitchell R. said, still use radius now, grin haha.
Yeah. Oh, Jackstack says, wait, IVT was an ISP? It was when it was Mission Internet, before the name changed to IVT. It wasn't just an ISP, it was primarily online software, but as a sideline I started offering internet access services. Stephen said, did you have 100 pairs running into your garage to run an ISP via a couple of T1 lines? No, I had an E1 line because Australia used the European standard. A T1 is the American standard. The rest of the world used E1. And I had...
System notification. 1 hour remaining.
Yeah, I didn't... I didn't have... How was that done? Yeah, this is chasing a squirrel. Yeah, I actually had a Telstra mini exchange rack in the basement of my house that I was running Mission Internet from with an E1 line. So a T1 is like a multi-channel, it's a bonded multi-channel 1.5 megabit per second total throughput system, I think, with a couple of signaling channels, and an E1 is a 2 megabit per second aggregated throughput system. So I had an E1 line into my garage. But that was back in the 90s. Probably before some of you were born. Yeah. Tassie says, I ran an ISP here in Tassie just before ADSL took off. We had about 1,200 channels of E1. Right. Memories. Yeah, I somewhere around here I still have an E1 router that cost, I think it was about $10,000 or $15,000 for one router, and now it is scrap metal. Imi said, which end of the 90s? Jack says, correct. T1 is 1.54 megabits per second, 23 B channels and 1 D channel. Yeah, so the D channel I think was the low throughput signaling channel. Anyway, history lesson time. So, okay, back to Unify. Back to PPSK. So, the whole point for me of PPSK is having a single SSID, which could be something like Superhouse IoT, you know, an SSID, a wireless network just for IoT devices, and then issue a different password to each device that joins that network, so that you can invalidate a device or kick it off your network without kicking off all the devices off. Now, the way Unify have implemented their PPSK, I think from what I've read, what it does is assign a password per VLAN, and therefore you need to create a VLAN for each password, like the two of them are joined together, which means that you would need to create a VLAN for every device that connects to your network, and that sucks. I don't want to have to create a VLAN for every device. Now, I may be wrong about that. That was just my interpretation of reading the early info about it when they announced that they were doing PPSK. So perhaps what they have done is is something more akin to what I am wanting, and now the IoT-AP project is totally redundant, but although not necessarily totally redundant, because it can be combined with other things. Like we can add other radios into it, like Bluetooth and Zigbee and other things that make it useful in a home automation situation, and sensors and like presence sensing, for example, could be built into the access point. So it's not totally redundant, but my understanding is yes. Oh, okay. So Jack said, I think you are correct. I wish they would start to support VXLANs.
This is an order. Alexa, squirrel, squirrel, squirrel. You can't stop us.
I know
3T
about
definitely makes
1,200
adoption
squirrels, including squirrel, red squirrel, marmot, and prairie dog.
Oh, that's funny. Oh, oh, Mitchell, you woke up. She who shall not be named. Yeah. No, Mitchell, don't apologize. That was funny. I didn't know there were 1,200 types of squirrels. Alexa knows about 1,200 types of squirrels. I said the word and it didn't wake up. Andrew says it certainly looked like password per VLAN type thing. Yes, that's right. That was my interpretation. So I don't think that it does what I want the IoT AP to be, which is a simple SSID and then give one password per device that connects. Like, that's as complicated as I want it to be. I don't want to be every device on its own VLAN just for the sake of having separate passwords. All right, now, what I'm going to show you now is the code that, well, first thing I will do is run it. I'm going to run this test runner at the point that it's at right now. Oh, Jordan says I'll test and get back to you. Interesting. Yes, I would like to know. Now, let's have a look at this. So ignore the test BIM and test GIM scripts. This is classic proof of concept where there's a whole bunch of stuff hacked together. It's got multiple copies of scripts. It's got because like I was experimenting with things. Is it in Git? Yeah. So I do have Git keeping track of this, but it is very much an influx big mess sort of situation. So the things that we care about. Okay, so what I'm trying to do here is I'm in this stage of the project where I am just trying things and moving things around and trying to build a picture in my head of how this can all be structured, and then I'm implementing things and trying it, because a lot of the time you can sit there and theorize, and then the first time you try to use it, you discover a big problem with your theory. I'm doing this very much in a I want to start using this and then improving it sort of approach. So at the moment, what happens is there is a script called testrunner.py, and when I run testrunner, now the aim is that this is going to have a GUI on the touchscreen on the Raspberry Pi that is in the that is on the test thing. So you can see there on the camera, there is the Raspberry Pi sitting on the bench with the label printer behind it. Not a label printer, it's a receipt printer behind it. You can see where my cursor is. I wonder if I can zoom. No. So the device under test is sitting there on the bench. It looks very small in this view. and it is plugged into the tester. So there is the touch screen on the front of the Raspberry Pi. My plan is to use that touch screen for managing the tests. So selecting what device you're testing and initiating the test, etc. For now, all we are doing is running the script manually off the command line. And then there are some directories. Firmware, what is in firmware? I can't remember. Nothing. Okay. So let's get rid of firmware. So we've got archive, reports, and targets. What is archive? I think that might be, oh, that's just a whole lot of random stuff. All right, so we can ignore archive as well. And we can ignore test, bim, test gym, and trex.png. The things that we care about right now are test runner, which is the overall script that kicks off doing the stuff, the targets directory, and the reports directory. All right, so let me show you what I do with this at the moment. Imagine we have a board which is a client board and we need to load firmware on it and run some tests. Some automated tests and some manual tests. So 3 different things essentially. What the test runner does is ask, what I'll do is I'll just run it, I'll show you what it does, and then I'll show you how it did it. So if we manually kick off the test runner program now, enter the serial number of the device on the test. Oh, hang on. I'm going to edit something. Test runner, and there's lots of commented out stuff in here. Let's, oh no, we'll leave that. So we've got a whole lot of hard-coded things. We've got the name of the person running the test is hard-coded, and printer is enabled, firmware is enabled. What have we got? I'm gonna do this. And also, firstly, I'm not a Python programmer. Secondly, I'm not a programmer. So I'm probably doing things in really bad ways. All right, so I'm going to run test runner. Oh, hang on, name I. What did I screw up there? Print I. Hang on. Where was that from? Oh, that's why. That is never going to work. I was doing I for insert. All right. So the SKU. So the first thing it needs to know is what is the type of device that it's testing. And so what I'm basing that on is the SKU, or the stock keeping unit, like the product code of the device under test. So in this particular case, the board that I plugged in, the SKU is JIM, J-I-M. So I'm going to put that in, and then I'm going to say, okay, enter the serial number of the device under test. This is the point where if I was standing at the bench, like if I was out here, what I would do is there is a sticker on the board with a barcode on it and a serial number. So every board, you can see there are trays up here sitting on the shelf. It's a bit dark, but you can't really see very clearly. But this area where my cursor is pointing, there are trays up here. The trays are painted different colors depending on the status of the board. So purple means it's been through a reflow. Blue means that it's had its through-hole parts added to it. So when the boards come out of the reflow oven, they go into purple trays. And then once they have had parts hand soldered onto them, things like headers that need to be added manually, it goes into a blue tray. The boards in the blue trays are ready for testing, firmware, etc. Then after it's been tested, it goes into either a red or a green tray, depending on whether it's passed or failed. There are some red trays you can see there, and there are some green trays with other boards in them up behind this fume extraction thing. And from the red ones in the red trays go back for rework. The ones in the green trays get packed and sent off. So that's the basic workflow. Now, in this particular case, there is the device sitting here on the bench. It has had all its connectors put on. It's ready to have firmware loaded. So at this point, I would pick up the barcode scanner and zap the barcode label that is on the board so that the tester knows the serial number of the board. Now this particular one, so I'm just going to type this in. Type in a serial number of 1111 and press enter. And what should happen now, maybe it won't, this might fail. Oh no, it looked like it worked. If I come back to here, oh look, you can see coming out of the printer. I don't know if you could see that, but the printer then just dumped out a test report. So if I, what it did was upload the firmware to the device under test. So I'm going to go and grab that test report so I can show it to you. Yep. So the test report comes out of the printer, and then that gets folded up and packed with the board when it goes into its anti-static bag, so that when the customer receives it, they get the board and the test report. So now you've got to see what goes into what comes out of the test report. And I'm going to have to do some focusing here. Yeah. Okay. Focusing the overhead
System
camera.
notification. 45 minutes remaining.
Oh, Wagon Load says 1111 was the number on my last house. What am I doing? Okay, so if I switch to overhead camera, so this has, why do I have a, I don't know.
Scott Miller said, poor cleanish room protocols. Left the door open.
Yes, I did leave the door open. So this is a test report. So it's showing who the client is. Now I typed in the SKU of what that particular device is, and I said it is a gym. If we go back to, if I switch to that, and then we switch to that, you can see that I told the tester that it's a gym. In future I want it to auto-discover that, but that's a whole other thing. And I told it what its serial number was. Those are the two things that I told it. So based on the fact that it knew that it was a gym, it looked up some information and it found who the client is. It knows that it's T-Rex water trucks. It knows what the device is, joystick interface module. It's got its serial. It knows the hardware version, the firmware version that it loaded onto it, because it just loaded that firmware. And who tested it. This is today's date and timestamp. Automatic checks, installing firmware. Okay, so checks fall into two sections. There is the automatic check section and the manual check section. And my goal over time is to take as many of these manual checks as possible and make them automatic. At the moment, all this particular one did was install a firmware. So then there are a series of things that I have to look at myself, and like I grab a pen and I see serial number is below the SKU. So that is, that's just a thing saying where the sticker should be on the board. It's saying that the CAN terminal header has been fitted. Yes. CAN terminal jumper has been fitted. Yes. Now, panel LED header is white, and you can see aux LED header is green. Now these are things that, the fact that this connector is white and this connector is green, they are physically exactly the same connector. They're both the same type of connector. It's just that one of them is white and one of them is green, because on the PCB we want the client to be able to distinguish when they plug things in. The instructions say plug this into the green header and this one into the white header. So it's important that they are the correct colors. but there is no way that an automated test could check that unless we had a crazy test jig with like a color sensor on it or whatever. So these sorts of things are manually checked to ensure that that hasn't been screwed up in the assembly process. So there are all, and things like the VCAL header not fitted. So there is a header on the PCB for a VCAL header, but we do not want it installed. We want to leave that unpopulated. So one of the manual checks is VCAL header is not fitted. So you look at the board and you make sure that's not fitted. And the idea is that you go down and check, you know, things like desiccant has been placed in the bag. These extra headers are in the bag with it, etc. There is glue on the capacitors. So this is all of the quality assurance checks that have to be done before the board is approved to go to the customer. And there is also a version on the test, which at the moment I'm using a date to show that was the version of the test, because if the test changes, there might be new tests added or we might change tests or whatever. We need to know what version of the test that board was tested against, and that is the version of the test. And then there is a URL at the bottom, which currently doesn't go anywhere useful, but I will talk about that later. Okay, back to here. Yes, so there are a bunch of things that I want to add to this. But there are things like I want to take thermal camera images of the board while it's on the tester and store that image and then make that image accessible to the customer, which is what that URL at the bottom is for. So here is my my very crappy implementation of this. Now the test runner, what it does is, at the moment it's just got this hard-coded stuff that we'll ignore. It asks for the SKU of the device under test, or I could also hard-code it. Enter the serial number, so that is where we tell it what the serial number is, and then it generates a couple of things dynamically. So the directory, what it does is look in a directory called targets, and then the SKU. So in this case, what it would be doing is looking for a directory called targets/JIM/ and bails if it doesn't exist. Sets up some timestamps. It also looks for a reports directory and makes it if it doesn't exist. So there's a reports DUT target. We will look at that in just a second. And then it specifies a print file which goes into the reports DUT target and then the serial number, and then, oh look, that's hard-coded. That is a screw up. Okay, I've got to fix that. What are we using for that? DUT target, so that should be plus, let's change that, DUT target plus that. Okay, so we'll see the result of that in a moment. There's a timestamp and a .txt on the end. All right, I'm not going to spend too much time explaining this because you will see the result in a minute and it will make more sense. Manual checks file. Okay, so in here there is a manual checks file, manualchecks.txt, which we'll also see, and there is a config file called target.ini. So then we parse the config file, we get some things out of it. So we get the client name, the device under test name, hardware version, firmware version, test version, and then there is this standard header for the test report. And we substitute in the variables, like the name of the client. This is what came out on the top of that little test docket. And then automatic checks. At the moment, all it does is install the firmware. If installing firmware is enabled, it's calling an upload script, which with a dynamic path to it on a per target basis. once more, we'll see, this will all make more sense once you see the directory. Then there is the manual checks. So here you can see that the manual checks part of it, if I switch back to here, and on this test receipt, you can see manual checks, and then it's got all of these listed underneath it. That comes from here. You can see that it's writing manual checks, that's the header, and then it is opening the manual checks file and inserting it into the report. Then we've got the test version, which is coming out of the config, and then we've got a dynamically generated URL, which is just d.superlab.au with the device under test serial number. And then it just dumps it out to the receipt printer. So we've got print command, so it's calling LP, the line printer utility in Linux. It's printing it to this this 80 column receipt printer. Sorry, not 80 column, 80 millimeter wide receipt printer, and it's sending it the print file. And then it's doing an os.system call on the print command. So, hang on, I've just lost my I've just lost my ability to move around in this. I wonder if I can exit. No, I can't. I've lost my... I'm going to try logging in again from another terminal. Is that going to work? Oh, okay. No, I'm going to quit. Oh, what was the last change? I think I do want to write it because it was that DUT target change. Okay, now this is the bit where I have been struggling to figure out how to structure this. So there are two parts to this. I'll show you the second part first because I like doing everything backwards. Now if we have a look in the reports directory, you can see that there are reports for the different types of devices that I've been using for the tests. And then if we look in GIM, and you can see there is this one, quadruple one GIM, and then it's got the date, like the timestamp in the name, and that I believe should be the file that we just created. Because we just ran this test, it has created this file, and it has stored this little test receipt. So this is what was actually printed out on the receipt printer. And it'll keep it there. So the idea is that if you ever want to go back and look at the test report for a specific board, you can look it up by serial number by looking into the directory for the device type, and then you see its serial. And if you've run it multiple times, you'll see multiple entries here for quadruple one. It's just that they will have different timestamps. Okay. Jackstack said, say the eternal struggle of all CLI users, how do I exit Vim? No, that wasn't the issue. The issue was that I lost my network connection briefly to the thing. It wasn't responding. I couldn't up arrow or down arrow or anything. Wagon Load says it printed one left bracket in the wrong place. Aha! That is a very interesting observation. It actually didn't, but thanks for picking that up because it's a good thing to talk about. So this, if we look at this, you'll see right here, it says VCal completed. The left bracket is all the way over here. Now, that is because when I'm doing this, VCal is voltage calibration. What that does is on the serial console, it dumps out. So this is a separate operation that I do after running this process. It's part of the manual process at the moment. What it does is it dumps some calibration values out to the console. It stores them in non-volatile memory, so it sticks them in flash memory on the device under test, but it also dumps them to the console, and I hand write them on the test report. So what'll end up happening is if I'm doing this, it'll be VCal completed, and it'll be 1851, 1847, because there are 2 calibration values that come out of it. And I'll write them on the test report because this is ADC calibration on the ESP32. So at the moment, this is only being recorded by hand writing it into this space on the test report, which then goes into the bag and gets sent out with the board. And that's bad because it's not being stored anywhere else and it's not being checked automatically. So this is the key to the next part of this whole process. And I'm going to go back to here. Oh no, I want to be in Test Runner. I want to go into targets, because this is the critical thing. Defining the targets and what the tests are. So if I go into gem, what I've got is legacy, ignore that, manual checks.txt, target.ini and upload.sh are the things we care about. Now if we have a look at manual checks, you'll see that this is where that part of the report comes from. It's a text file. It's just a slab of text. It's a list of things to be done manually when running the test, like checking that the desiccant has been put in the bag with it, that the headers have been put in the bag with it, etc. So here you can see VCal completed, and there is the bigger gap in here so that I can hand write the result into that section.
System notification. 30 minutes remaining.
But what is missing from here is automatic checks. Hang on, I've got a cough again. Okay, but what is missing from here is automatic checks. Apart from uploading the firmware, there is nothing that this tester currently does automatically. What it does is upload the firmware and dump out the test report with a list of manual checks for me to then do manually. I've got to do them and tick them off. The goal with this, so the next stage with this is to have the tester connected to test points on the device under test. Right now it's only connected to the programming header, just that ESP flash header. It's not connected to anything else. But the what I need is the bed of nails so that the tester can make contact with other parts of the board, and it can run tests manually. So my goal is to take as many of these manual tests as possible and turn them into automatic tests. So for example, here's a classic one. Moves left, moves right, moves up, moves down. What this is doing is checking whether, in this particular case, so this thing that we're looking at right now is a joystick board with a CAN bus interface on it that is used for controlling water cannons. And what I want to know is, if I move the joystick to the left, so when you're testing the board, I have a joystick plugged into it. If I push the joystick to the left, does it send a left move command on the CAN bus? And at the moment, the way I test that is I plug it into a water cannon and I power it all up and I push the joystick to the left and I see that the water cannon moves left. And then I tick, yes, it moves left. However, that should be an automatic check. What I need is for the bed of nails connection to have a connection onto the joystick inputs so that it can simulate the joystick position, and a connection onto the CAN bus so that it can read the messages coming out of this board. So what the automatic tester would do is send a signal into the joystick input that makes the PCB think you've got a joystick plugged in and that the joystick is pushed left. And then what you do is the tester would also be reading the CAN bus messages and seeing is it sending a left message? And if it is, it's good. It can mark that test as passed. And then it simulates moving the joystick to the right, and then it checks whether you get a right move message coming out of CAN bus, and then it marks that one as good. And so on and so on. Same with stream button extends, fog button retracts, valve button works. You know, all of these sorts of things can be tested automatically by the test jig. There are certain things that are going to have to be eyeballed, like these ones, as I said earlier, checking that this particular header is green and that this particular header is white. So that's a manual check that will just have to be done. And the fact that you've put the desiccant in the bag with it, it's just part of the manual process that can't be automated. But so the next step with this is beginning the framework that automates these sorts of tests. Okay, so what else do we have in here? If we have a look in target.ini, so this is the configuration for this particular target. And you can see that we've got the test version defined here. So if I change the tests, I would increment this test version. This particular board, the hardware version is 5 and the firmware version is 4.02. Now, both of these potentially could be derived automatically in future, but right now I have just got it in the configuration file. So there is the name of the device under test, so that's the full name, and there is the client name, and there is a firmware flasher path. So you can see that the firmware flasher path is targets gym upload.sh. And if we look at okay, so let's have a look at upload.sh. This is, I'll drag that out so that it's so it doesn't wrap. So this is just a call out to ESP tool. The idea here is that upload.sh could be anything. The config for this particular board that I want to test has, in fact, let's have a look at this. So we've got, you can see here that we've got the firmware flasher is configured as being targets gym upload.sh. So I could point this anywhere. It just needs to be something that can be executed. And in this particular case, I've got upload.sh, which you can see in the bottom. And this is a shell script that uses Python 3 to run ESP tool. It gives it a bunch of information, so what the chip is, the port for the programmer, blah, blah, blah. And then it passes it binary images. So it doesn't recompile the code every time. Compile the code once, grab the binaries, and the file system image, that sort of thing. The partition definition is right here, the partitions image. So then each time that it needs to do it, it just calls ESP tool and uploads these binaries to these hex addresses in the memory of the ESP32. So, come on. Oh. This is funny. What mode am I in? There. I couldn't get out of Vim. What else do we care about? Oh yeah, so in releases, this is where the binary image was. So that, if we have a look in upload, you can see the path to the binary image is in the releases directory, and there are multiple firmware releases. So you can see there is the current firmware release, there is the previous firmware release, etc. Which I'm not going to show you because that's all client related stuff. Pause to take a breath and take stock. Where am I up to? Tech Nebula says you can use a color sensor to check LEDs. Yes, that's right, I can. So later, Okay. I'm scrolling back through chat because I have been ignoring it again. Oh, okay. Jordan, so this is a callback to the thing about PPSK and Unify. Jordan says, having used it, you can assign an unlimited number of passwords assigned to the same VLAN. That's really interesting. Okay, I didn't know that. That makes Unify's implementation of PPSK far more useful. Yeah, that was a comment from ages back in the chat, sorry. Right. Oh, and Stephen says, just rebuilt my Unify container, and you can add multiple passwords on the same network, but they aren't assigned to a specific device, just lots of passwords. That is actually okay, because the issue is not really binding a password to a specific device. It is just not reusing passwords between devices. So that if, for example, one device on your network becomes compromised and it knows what its password is, you can invalidate that password and kick the device off your network, and that it doesn't affect any other devices because they're all using their own individual passwords and they don't need to change. Yeah, so that's okay. Yeah, Gavin said, I love your camera angle in the cleanish room. I'm giving it to you here again just for your viewing pleasure. Keeps making me tilt my head like a cat would if confused. Yeah. That way. Yeah. Confused cat. Trying to catch up on chat. Jack's text said embed all of that in a 2D barcode. Yeah, so the barcode could include the SKU, so the type of device, and the serial number. That is true. And also Jack's text said optical inspection with a webcam. Hang on. I am going to need to take a drink. I was beginning to suffer iced coffee deficiency, which is not good. Yeah. So Jack's text also said optical inspection with a webcam. Yes. So part of the structure, what you can see here with the tester, maybe I should go and get the tester. I think I will. Although doing that means shutting it down. Okay, before I will get back to that whole optical inspection thing, Jack's Tech, because that is really important and interesting, and it leads on to the next part of this whole story. But before I do, before I shut this down, I just want to take stock and think about this and talk through what I'm likely to do next. So what I will probably do is, yeah, so this has, yeah, it's not defined in there. So if I have a look at, oh no, on a CD, back to here, test runner, and then we've got manual checks. Now, this is the point where I do not yet have an answer on how to define it. Now in here, if I do, so I've got manual checks there, automatic checks up here. I'm just going to add an extra space or two to differentiate it. So we've got a block at the top here for automatic checks, and all it does is run the firmware installer. So it looks for the upload script, this one right here, and then executes it. Command output, print, Yeah, so it does the os.p open and it runs that particular script. Then it moves on to the manual checks here, which is opening the manual checks file and just inserting it into the test report. It doesn't have to do anything else. There's no execution of that. It just, yeah, it just does it. So what I need right in here somewhere is some way to run automatic checks or tests. I have nothing for that yet, nothing at all. And I'm at the stage of pondering the best way to do this, because the whole idea with this is this script that we're looking at right now, the test runner, there should be nothing in this script that is specific to a target board or a board type. It should derive everything from the definition for that board. So what it could be, for example, is, well, let's see, where is manual checks? I could do, where is it? Where is it? Manual checks file. Okay, I could do automatic checks file equals DUT, and then I could do that as automatic checks.py is an option. And this may end up being the best way to do it. I don't know. So the automatic checks could be defined as, and the thing is that these checks can be really complicated. It can be things like that example I was giving before, where we have to drive an output of the tester,
System notification, 15 minutes remaining.
which is going to the target board. So we're driving an output to simulate a joystick position. So we're running a digital to analog converter to generate an analog voltage that goes into the joystick input on the board. And then we will need to wait some period of time for a stabilization, you know, 100 milliseconds or something, you know, some arbitrary thing. And then we need to be reading CAN bus messages. Oh, Johnny!
Johnny Bergdahl has gifted 5 memberships.
Thank you, Johnny. That's very generous.
Dons from NZ has received a gifted membership from Johnny Bergdahl.
It's going to say that a lot.
Has received a gifted membership from Johnny Bergdahl.
I'm just going to talk over it.
David Howes has received
So-
a gifted membership from Johnny Bergdahl.
Except that it's thrown my brain.
Has received a gifted membership from Johnny Bergdahl.
Yeah, in that particular case, we're driving an output on the DAC, and then we are watching CAN bus and parsing CAN bus messages and checking whether the message matches what we expect it to match. So that is a complicated thing, and trying to define that in a something like a config file, I think is going to be almost impossible. It's not just like drive this output high and see if this, and then read this input and check whether it's at a certain value. It is much more complicated than that. So it's not enough to have a simple config file that defines the tests. I think it's going to have to be a big chunk of Python, unfortunately. But that's kind of the way it is. Maybe there will end up being a couple of classes of check, like simple pin checks versus complicated, I am going to do this and then I'm going to watch CAN bus, or I'm going to interact via CAN bus, or I'm going to watch the serial console and execute a voltage calibration command and then read the value that comes back and then store that value against that board. Like all of that sort of thing. That's going to be kind of complex.
Miller said snake testing.
Kind of complicated. Snake testing, I don't think I've heard that term. Yeah. So, oh, and other complications. So many other complications. I just saw there was a comment about using a jumper to tell the tester to run an auto test. Yeah, so test mode in firmware is an interesting one as well, and
Scott
even
Miller
test
said
firmware.
Python. Snaky language.
Ah, snaky language. Right. Thanks, Scott. Now I get it. Snake testing. So one option is to do 2 firmware loads. The first firmware that you load onto the target board
Scott Miller said Python, snaky language.
is just test firmware, and all it does is run some tests, and then you replace it with the production firmware afterwards. Another option is to have test functionality in the production firmware, and you put it into like a test mode, or you call test commands on it. A third option is to not have explicit test modes in the firmware, but to treat it like a black box functional test, and to exercise the board and make sure that it behaves the way that it should, by doing things like simulating a joystick input and then seeing what output you get from the board. And so anyway, those are 3 different approaches to that part of the problem. So what I've just done is added this automaticchecks.py thing, which then means that down in here, like at the point of doing the automatic checks, where is it? Here. I would run that, I would execute that automatic checks Python file, or include it in here basically, have it inlined. And what that will need to do is send some output that gets accumulated so that it can be part of the printed out result. So what I would need to do is accumulate output from each of those checks and whether they passed or failed, and an overall flag about whether this board has passed or failed its tests or not, because if it fails any tests, I want it to come up at the end and say board failed, and the report should tell you why. So then you can do rework or figure it out. But for things like running, doing the test where it moves the joystick left and then you see that the CAN bus messages change, I want it to run that test and then in the test report say joystick moved left, and it worked and it's okay. So actually say all of the things that have been tested. So this is a big black hole in the process right now, right here. Whoops. Right here, some way to run automatic tests. That is one of the next things that I need to do. Now, stuff it, just exit. So I'm going to, before I shut it down, there was a comment earlier about trex.png, and I don't think there's nothing in, no, there's nothing in targets. What I want to do is, at the moment, it's generating reports, come on, I can type. It's generating these text file reports which are being printed. So it is just a simple text file, there's nothing else to it. And the result is, as you can see there. But what I want to do is add graphics into this. I want to, at the moment there's no QR code, there's nothing else. What I want to be able to do is add like the customer's logo in here, and if there are things like charts of calibration values, I want to add those in there. So what I'm going to end up with is not just a simple text file for this, it's going to end up being probably PostScript or something. So I need a like a file formatter thing that is going to take marked up text and insert images at correct locations like a template parser, and then generate PostScript to send to the printer at the end. Also, the results of all of this need to be stored in a database so that the customer can go to the URL and see this is the board, this is when it was assembled, this is when it was tested, these are the test results, here is a photo of the board, here is a thermal image of the board, etc. And I'll get to that in just a second. So what I'll do is shut that down because I'm going to bring the tester in here to show you its current state. Back to here. Wake and Load says image.num.jpg. Stephen says you could be less specific with the auto test pass, joystick input pass, but behind it tests left, right, up, down. Yeah, that's true, exactly. I don't necessarily need to report, yes, it worked going left. However, yeah, so you can aggregate tests. You can have like a class of tests and report whether it passed that group of tests. But that information is actually incredibly useful for debugging, because what can happen is it may fail on the x-axis on the joystick and work on the y-axis, or it may fail going left on the joystick but work going right. So saying that it failed that group of tests doesn't necessarily give you all of the information that you need to debug the problem. So, I need to cough properly, get my throat clear. All right, so tester is now shut down. Screen is saying no signal. I'll turn that off and then unplug everything. So I've got the keyboard and the mouse and printer and programmer all plugged in, and unplug that, and I'll turn off the lab supply. And I will bring this in to show you. I'm going to close the door. In fact, I may have to zoom out a bit to show this. How far can I zoom out?
System notification. 5 minutes
No,
remaining.
that's focus. I want zoom out. Okay. Once the focus assist drops out, I think that'll be all right. Yes, okay. So this is the tester as it currently stands. Side view, you can see it's got the touch screen on the front here. So it's a 5-inch touchscreen, and in the back you can see there's a Raspberry Pi mounted up behind the touchscreen. It's got an HDMI little bridge connector going in there. It's on a laser cut base, and it's got this PCB on the back, which is the test connection PCB. So the Raspberry Pi needs some way to be able to connect to the device under test. And the idea is that back here there will be the bed of nails. So there'll be a laser cut structure which holds the board in place, and then all of the pins sticking up. And these connections across the back here are for the different types of I/O that is required to connect to the device under test. So we've got a power connector here, and that provides 3.3 volts, 5 volts, 12 volts, all with current sensing. So these chips along here are INA260 power sensor chips, so that I can detect short circuits on power rails and measure power consumption on the device under test. These two connectors here are sets of digital I/O pins. This is analog inputs running through voltage dividers, so that I can measure up to 32 volts on these, and they are going into 16-bit ADCs that you can see here. This is DAC channels, so there is a DAC here, digital to analog converter, driving outputs. So with this I can generate analog signals for things like simulating the joystick position. This is a CAN bus connector, so that if the device has CAN bus, then there's a cable that comes off here and plugs into CAN bus. This relay is for controlling power to the device under test, so that what I can do is have it unpowered, and then the tester can send a command, fire the relay, and power up the target, do its measurements, and then power it down again. So it's got full power control of the device under test. This is the input, the main power input that comes from my lab power supply. So that's just the general power source for the tester, power switch, and there's a Raspberry Pi Pico that you can see here. Oh, and down under here, you can't really see it, but it's a power supply and stuff, more stuff. So this is the thing. The Raspberry Pi that is doing the high-level operation of the tests is not directly interfacing with the device under test. That is being done by the Raspberry Pi Pico that sits here, and there's no cable on it right now, but the idea is that there would be a USB cable coming from the Pico to the Pi, so that the Pi talks to the Pico does all of the I/O. And in this case it also has a CAN shield in the middle there, it's stacked underneath. So the Pico has CAN bus and all of the I/O connected to it, and the Raspberry Pi will just talk to it via USB. So that's this I haven't done anything with yet. That's the next step of the process as well. So when a test is defined, what I could do is have custom firmware on the Pico that is loaded based on the device that we are testing. So if, for example, it knows that it's going to be testing a gym, what it will do is load firmware onto the Pico that has CAN bus support, and it has all of the specific things that it needs to connect to the device under test, being the gym. So that is a major part of the development. So what I need to do is store not just the firmware for the target device, but also store the firmware to go on the Pico related to that target device. Whew. What next? What else was I going to talk about? Oh, Henrik is here. Hello, Henrik.
System notification. Stream is over.
Lunchtime. Okay, so Tech Nebula said, I think the functionality versus hardware testing is two separate stories. Functionality is tested and verified. If there is ambiguity for functionality, validation has not been done correctly. Yeah. And Stephen says you can store the more granular results in a file, but they don't need to be on the paper that goes with the board. That is correct, yes. Okay, so then yeah, Take Nebulous is making some interesting points there, but I think I'll get back to that in a second. Now, the whole thing about images and the URL, etc. Switch back to here. Now, obviously what I have not built yet is the bed of nails thing that goes on the back here. That is going to have to be specific to the device under test. And I have not yet got to the point of building that, so I need to do that. And part of that structure, what I want to allow for is a Raspberry Pi camera. So I got some long, they're around here somewhere. I've just bought some 600mm long Raspberry Pi camera cables from Core Electronics, because what I wanted to do is run a really long camera cable out from the Pi and take it to a Pi camera, a Pi cam, if we're looking at this sideways. So imagine we're looking at it sideways here, the device under test is here, on like the bed of nails thing will be here, just behind the touchscreen. Then there should be some kind of a frame or gantry that goes up with a camera mounted above the tester, looking down on the PCB of the device under test. And I want two cameras. I want this one. So this is a pure thermal lepton thermal camera. So what I want to do is have the thermal camera and the Raspberry Pi camera mounted side by side, looking straight down on the device under test. And when it runs the test, there are certain situations. For example, if you're testing a board that has motor drivers on it, the test chassis may have dummy loads, like big high wattage resistors, so that what you can do is...
Scott Miller said the color camera could be used to automate visual tests.
Yes, that's true. So, sorry, Scott just said that the color camera could be used to automate visual tests. Yes, like looking for
Scott
LEDs.
Miller said the color camera could be used to automate visual tests.
Yes, like looking for LEDs being turned on, that sort of thing. Ultimately, yes, that would be interesting if that could be done. So, infrared camera, color camera. So what I might want to do, for example, is turn on a motor driver and run the output of the motor driver through the dummy load so that it is actually working. The motor driver is running significant current through the dummy load, and I can verify with sensors like
Miller said honest. I'm not repeating myself.
I know you're not. It's the text-to-speech that is glitching. So the analog sensing could be measuring the output from the motor driver, and the thermal camera could be looking at it and making sure that you don't have excessive heat in the motor drivers. So, and then the down-looking camera will just take an overall photo of it. So what I want to be able to do, okay, so this is my goal. Now that you've got an idea of the whole test setup, device under test here, test being controlled by the Raspberry Pi, 2 cameras looking down on it, one infrared, one visible spectrum. What I want to happen is when the customer gets their report, there will be a URL that they can go to and
System notification, Peter is hangry.
and log in. So obviously this would be password protected, and it would be based on who the customer is. So it's not enough to just know the serial number of a board. It has to be a serial number that is associated with you. So if you had privileges, what you could do is go to this URL, which right now does not exist. Like D as a host name does not even exist. I haven't set this up in DNS. So you could go to that URL and you would see all the details about what the device is, when it was assembled, when it was tested, all of the test results, calibration values if they have been stored, and photos of the board as the test was being executed. So basically lots and lots of information about that specific board, and things like the output of the command that does the firmware upload. Ooh, you haven't seen the real Steve yet. Here he is. And there's Steph. So yes, welfare check complete. Yeah, so I want to give that as a dashboard to my clients so that they can look up any board and see its full history, its manufacturing and test history. And there might have been multiple tests run. So there might be a test that was run and you can see the execution of the test results, but it fails something. Like maybe there's a resistor that's tombstoned on the PCB, and so some test failed because it didn't function correctly. So then the board goes back for rework, you fix the resistor, you execute the test again, and then there is a second test run, and you can see that the second set of test results is all correct. Yeah. Right. Yes, there is a CAN bus adapter and a Pico. What was that in reply to? So that I was replying to Henrik. Where is Henrik's comment? Oh, so yeah, that's right. Henrik asked, are there 2 Picos stacked together? No, it's a CAN bus shield and a Pico. Okay. This is... I'm tired. Yeah, so as you can see, there is a lot of work to do on this tester. I need to do the bed of nails thing. I need to figure out how to define automatic tests. I need to do firmware for the Pico so that it can drive those I/O pins, all the different types of I/O pins. Okay, this is the big question. This is something that you can help me with. What protocol is what protocol should I use for communication between the Raspberry Pi and the Pico? Because the Pico is going to be doing all of the I/O. And the thing is that, the alternative is, should I get rid of the Pico entirely? Now, keep in mind that this is an experiment. This is like a proof of concept tester, and it probably will not stay in this format. I'm just trying to make something work. Oh, Jack's Tech said SCPY. What is SCPY? It sounds like secure copy. Yeah, auto-sync files over... Yeah, can't use USB cable. Yes, I can, but that's not the point. The point is that what I want to do is have firmware running on the Pico, and there is the test runner that is on the Pi. Now, the test runner needs to be able to do things like send a command to the Pico saying drive GPIO 7 high, and then read GPIO 3 and tell me the result. So what I want to do is use the Pico like a remote I/O expander. That's basically its job. And so what I need to do is, oh, good point. Steven says keep the Pico. It makes any faults that might blow up inputs and the controller only blow up a $10 part and not the Pi. That is a very, very good point. Yes. Oh, Skippy. The serial control used by most lab equipment. Right. Didn't that used to be like, what was the old term for that? Yeah, lab equipment protocol. Yeah, there was another term for it because it was invented by some company and they had their own name for it. It's a laboratory equipment control interface. Right. GPIB, that's it. Thanks, Jack's Tech. Yeah, GPIB is what it used to be known as. That's how I remember it. So Jack said, when you need a rake, bring out the bulldozer and use MQTT for inter-device comms. I actually could do that. Now there is a project from the early days of Arduino, and every time I need to look it up, I can't remember what it was called. Use Arduino as remote I/O options. No. Pico emulates serial, then JPIB, John's PIB as the protocol. No. Somewhere. Control a slave Arduino from your RPi via USB. Yeah, I'm finding, yeah, I need to do some searches on this. Serial Pi. Okay, so we can run Serial Pi, obviously, that is not a problem. NanPi, download the NanPi files. What is NanPi? Okay. This is the point where I need to do some Googling and reading. Modbus is another option. Yep. SCPI. It's pronounced Skippy. Yeah, SCPI. Standard commands for programmable instruments. Yep. So I need to look that up. Maybe that is useful. I actually did some Skippy stuff a little while ago because it's supported on the on my O1 multimeter. Amazingly, it's incredible that something so old is still supported on modern equipment. Yeah. Wagonload says, I was designing an ESP32 to HPIB interface, then I thought I2C might be better, then CAN bus might be better than I2C. Yeah. All right, so that's the other thing. I also want to listen for specific CAN bus messages or send specific CAN bus messages. Now, the good thing is that can be encapsulated in the firmware that goes on the Pico, because what I could do is have a function on the Pico, for example. I'm just making something up, but say I was testing a motor controller that uses CAN bus, and when you send it a specific CAN bus message, it turns on the motor. What I could do is have in the firmware that runs on the Pico, it can have the specific CAN bus stuff where it initializes the bus and it can send arbitrary messages. I could have it coded up in there so that it sends a turn on the motor command, and I could have that as a function. So what I could do from the Raspberry Pi is just send a high level command, which is turn on the motor. And it doesn't need to know anything about CAN bus, it doesn't need to know how the message is formatted or anything like that. It just says execute this test, like execute the turn on motor test. And then the Pico knows how to format the CAN bus message and send it, etc. And then it just returns the result of yes, it worked, or no, it didn't work. So I don't need to do things like send CAN messages between the Pi and the Pico. I just need to send CAN messages from the Pico to the device under test. So maybe something like Skippy would work, or there are all sorts of things that could be done. Someone mentioned Modbus. Stephen George says, don't forget the old AT commands as the protocol too. Yes, and there was
System notification. Peter is super hangry. 15 minutes ago.
Now, this might sound silly, but it's actually not that silly, is what is the music protocol? The RS485 based thing that's used for controlling musical devices? Someone please remind me. There is my brain is MIDI. Thank you Jax Tech and Henrik. And yes, Mitchell says DMX.
Mitchell R said DMX.
Yes, so DMX is primarily used for things like lighting and pyrotechnic control, but there's MIDI, DALI, DMX. So MIDI is a possibility because, as I keep telling myself, the protocol that goes between the Pi and the Pico does not have to carry a lot of information or be very complex. All it has to do is say execute test 1 and get the result, execute test 2 and get the result. So so it's possible that something like MIDI is or KNX is another one. Okay, says Henrik. Describes the exact purpose of the device, digital multiplex, DMP. Yes. So anyway, I need to decide how to communicate between the Raspberry Pi and the Pico, and I need to start developing some firmware on the Pico to do some of this testing. Yeah, that's right. Stephen says the tests themselves are all baked into the Pico firmware. Exactly. Which means I also have to decide how I'm going to do that. Am I going to do that with MicroPython? Am I going to do that with C? Because with a Pico you can program it using Arduino IDE, for example. I think probably the best thing to do is to stick to MicroPython and really be in the sorry, brain jumped to a different topic. Bring it back again. Within the same sort of code ecosystem. If I'm using Python on the Pi to run the high-level management of the test process, I should use MicroPython to run on the Pico, I think, so that it's as consistent as possible. It shouldn't be two totally different software environments. Even though I am not a MicroPython person, I'm not a Python person, I have a feeling that is my gut feeling is that Python is the correct solution for this problem. It's the right tool for the job, and MicroPython is the right tool for the job for the other part of it. So even though I'm not that familiar with it myself, it's worth using the right tool for the job and learning as I go so that I can...
Scott Miller said, isn't the RP2040 basically dedicated to using MicroPython?
Yes, that's the intention of it. I have programmed them. So I've actually designed boards with the RP2040 on it directly, like the microcontroller that's on the Pico. I've designed that directly into projects for clients and then programmed it out of Arduino IDE. You can do it using C. Runs perfectly well. It works very well. But I think in this case, using MicroPython is the correct tool for the job. Yeah, Mitchell says, snakes are slithery, be careful of the small ones. Yeah, in the pie zone. Yeah. Oh, and Scott also said, being a dedicated MCU, it doesn't even need a full protocol. Just send it a number and program it to run the appropriate test. Yes, and Steve, that's following on from Stephen's comment, which was you could just do regular serial comms for that basic stuff. Yes, exactly. So the communications protocol between the two could be really, really simple. It could just be send it a command, like a number of a test to execute. And because the test runner that's on the Pi is matched to the firmware on the Pico knows when I'm told to run test 1, I do this. I drive these pins to these levels, I delay for a settling time, I read from these pins. If they match this, I report pass. If they don't, I report fail. So it could be as simple as that. But this is something that's going to have to evolve over time. Yeah. Yes. Oh, Henrik said, weirdly the clock says 4 AM here. Usually end of your live says 3 AM. Yeah, we were talking about that at the start of the stream. It's because of daylight savings changes in different time zones around the world. Yeah. Okay, I am going to go. I am well over time now at 2 hours and 20 minutes. So, yeah. Thank you for all the ideas in relation to this test system. Doing this test jig is a major project. Trying to make it as generic as possible because I want to make it so that I can test all sorts of different boards with it. Yeah, it's a lot of work. So, thank you for coming along. And
Mitchell R said sometimes a squirrel stream is a good stream.
Yeah, although I'm actually surprised at how focused this stream ended up being. Once I got onto the test jig, that was kind of the topic. So thank you everybody for coming along. I hope you have an awesome weekend. It is a long weekend here in Melbourne, in Australia, because it is the Easter long weekend. So we had Friday as a public holiday and Monday as a public holiday. It's a 4-day weekend. Not that it really changes anything much for me. But yes, I will
Scott
talk
Miller
to you
said
all.
The squirrels were in focus tonight.
Yeah, they were in focus. I will talk to you all really soon. I hope you have an awesome weekend and go and make something awesome. Bye.